critics say something, but didn't. Some critics say, aha, but didn't God forbid incest? No, not at that time. It was only later during the days of Moses, around 1446 BC, and after the gene pool had undergone years of contamination by sin, that the Lord forbade incest in Leviticus 28:20.
That's right. And we got Patriot Greg in the chat room who just, before you even laid that out,
uh-oh. I don't know why I went back there.
Something,
hey, slow down.
Some critics say, aha, but didn't God forbid incest? No, not at that time. It was only later during the days of Moses, around 1446 BC, and after the gene pool had undergone years of contamination by sin, that the Lord forbade incest in Leviticus 28:20.
that's right. And we got Patriot Greg in the chat room who just, before you even laid that out, he said, sorry about that, Al. We're having a problem. If you want to log out and log back in, we'll probably fix that. He's getting the echo. But Patriot Greg said Adam and Eve had many sons and daughters who intermarried. Incest was not condemned in the pre-flood era, and that's exactly what you said. So, yeah, that clarifies the proclamation of the preaching false doctrine that Chef Rob had brought up. So I wanted to bring up something. You better.
Can I clarify something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, earlier when we was talking about when the subject was all the Bible stories in the Quran, something that should be understood by every non-Muslim is that the Quran and the Hadith and the Sirah are mostly political and not religious. By political, by religious, I mean what Muslims do in a spiritual sense to get to heaven. Like they tithe, go on the hijrah, all that. But the rest of it, the political, is how Muslims are to treat non-Muslims. 61% of the Quran is about non-Muslims. Also, there are 245 verses in the Quran that could be considered positive verses about non-Muslims, but every single one of those verses have been abrogated, as we talked earlier, by later negative verses about non-Muslims, and not one positive verse remains about non-Muslims. And in contrast, there are 327 verses of intolerance towards non-Muslims and 109 verses specifically advocating violence towards non-Muslims, and not one of them have been abrogated. And the conclusion of the author of this article wrote, my conclusion is that non-Muslims who like Islam don't know much about it, because Islam has more to do about the subjugation of non-Muslims than what Muslims do to get to heaven. That's why I and everyone who studies it says it's a political ideology cloaked in a veneer of religion.
Yes. Very, very good point. And another reason why, another point I wanted to make too also is the reason why we're doing this show is that there's three main types. False religion, false doctrine injures people. It's simple. There's three areas that it injures you: physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And all three of those are, you made a point earlier in our talk that you believe that Islam is a cult. And it does fit, it fits the description of a cult. Okay.
Yeah, it's a cult in the sociological sense. There's two types of cults. A theological cult, one that doesn't adhere to the cardinal doctrines of that faith, whether, like earlier you said, the Nation of Islam. Islam has nothing to do with the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam is a cult, a heterodox or non-orthodox denomination of Islam.
Yes.
Yeah. And I was going to say something else, but I forgot. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay. I was also going to say that cults, they distort or deny three key biblical doctrines. That is the doctrine of the Trinity, the person and work of Jesus Christ, and the gospel of salvation by grace alone through faith. That also makes Islam a cult.
No, not in that sense, brother. If you believe those things and you still call yourself a Christian, that makes you a Christian cultist in the theological manner. But there's also a sociological cult that uses mind control, occultic mind control techniques. Like there's an acronym for, if you study mind control techniques, there's an acronym for, it's called the BITE models: behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotion control. Islam, when I refer to Islam and other people refer to it as a cult, they mean that it is a mind control thing. It's not like it's not a deal of Christianity that's just perverted the essential doctrines. Like if you look at Jim Jones, he taught false doctrine, plus he also was real strong on the sociological mind control, manipulation of the people. But you look at like Charles Manson, he had no religious theme to his whole thing, but he's still considered by sociologists or whatever to be a cult just on the mind control thing.
Yeah, and you know what's funny about not funny, but it's an irony that when they went to Jamestown, Guyana, to clean up all those dead bodies that Jim Jones had convinced to drink the poison lake. They killed them all. They cleaned up that place, and you know what? They did not find one single Bible in the whole place.
Oh, really? Huh? I didn't know that.
Yes, not a single Bible.
What was he preaching off of? His notes or what?
No, this is what happened. He started off on track. And this is what happens with lots of cults. They start off on track, and then they begin to twist a little, change a little, move a little, and before you know it, they're completely off track. This is what happened. This is what happened so the people basically stopped listening to. He stopped preaching. He stopped preaching the word, and he basically start calling himself God. This is why I have a problem with these pseudo Christians that are running around talking about you are a God, little g. I have a problem with it, because that's not. Once you start down that road, there's nothing but trouble up ahead. There's nothing but trouble and destruction and murder and all kinds of vile things up ahead when someone gives you the power to you are God. Because
I hadn't studied Jim Jones, but I've been studying cults and doing cult apologetics since about 85, and I started studying in 85 and started doing apologetics in 98. And like with Mormonism, that's true. And all other cults, like the Book of Mormon actually teaches the Trinity and other Christian essential doctrines. It's not until later that he got perverted. Right. And so that's true there. And there was something else I was going to say, but I forgot. You got anything to say, Jim?
I got plenty to say. I want to tell our listeners, listen, you guys, because we're coming up on the end of the show, you're going to want to stay with us. We're going to be back next Tuesday. And next Tuesday, we're going to line up Roman Catholic.
Because we're out of time, our worship service will be starting soon. I'm going to go ahead and open up to questions for people that are here, and then I'm going to say a few things about what non-Muslims can do about Islam. And we have probably about 10 minutes left, so do any of y'all have any questions about Islam? Has anyone here read the Quran? No. Does anybody have any questions?
Who mostly teach violence?
They're mostly what?
teach violence.
Seek violence?
Teach violence.
Teach violence. But
Yes, there's, as
violence
mentioned,
to anybody that does not believe as they do.
yeah, there's, as I mentioned here, there's peaceful verses and violent verses in the Quran. By verses, I mean commands. There's, if you talk to a Muslim, they'll tell you, quote to you commands where they're supposed to be peaceful to others. But the jihadists, they quote commands that says that they must commit violence. They must fight the unbelievers until all submit, and all religion is of Allah. So the reason there's two different kinds of verses is that Muhammad started out as one guy with only his wife Khadijah told him that he was a prophet. It took him 13 years to get 100 followers. During that time, for about 7 years, he taught peace to everyone and tried to convince the Christians and Jews that he was another prophet in the line of Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. But they said, hey, we know prophets and you're no prophet. And so then he started persecuting the Christian, the Jews, and the pagans around. He started telling them that all their gods were wrong and that they had to believe in him as Allah's last messenger. Well, then, when he started persecuting them, saying that, they started persecuting him back and they drove him out of town. He went from Mecca to Medina, or Medina to Mecca, whichever one. I have to get them backwards sometimes. And whenever he got there, there was something like, I forget, there was hundreds of different tribes, Arabic tribes, that all had a different god in the Kaaba. And there was controversy between them, and he came in and moderated a peace pact between the two major tribes that were at each other's throat. And so through that, he got political power. So then he became a political figure. After he established so much political power, then he became a military leader and he established his own religion. So what you've got in the book is you've got a Meccan Quran and a Medinan Quran. In Mecca, before the Hijrah, before he immigrated, he was preaching peace. And the term that we talked about on the radio show, abrogation, all those peaceful verses are abrogated by the violent ones. And the violent ones are the ones that Muslims are to follow today. The Quran says that if a Muslim does not wage jihad, that he's a hypocrite, worse than the infidels, the pagans, the Christians, and the Jews, and he's worthy of death.
Yeah. What I got from what I talked to Muslims, and what they said was, Allah, he has no love.
That's absolutely true.
No love.
Muhammad himself said that whenever he died, he didn't know where he was going to go, where his soul was going to go, because the Quran states right out that he does not love anyone but Muslims, and then even a Muslim cannot be assured of his love because he is not a God that's destined to keep his word like our God. Our God said he loves you and you hold him to his word. But with Allah, he's fickle. He can change his mind. And so the only way for a Muslim to be guaranteed, they work on a judgment. Salvation is a judgment thing. One day when you die, your good works are going to be weighed, your bad works are going to be weighed. And if your bad works outweigh your good works, well, then you go to hell. Or you actually stay in hell. The Quran also says that everyone goes to hell. And that Muslims are ransomed from hell by Christians and Jews being sentenced to hell for all eternity. So by us getting sentenced for all eternity, Allah can choose some Muslims to get out. The only way to secure salvation, if you're a Muslim, is to die in jihad in Allah's cause. You've heard about the 72 virgins.
Yeah, them marked it as a martyr, or blow yourself up, kill somebody.
Well, see, they mess things up so much that what we call a martyr is someone that dies, that is killed. They proclaim Christ's name, and they're killed for proclaiming Christ's name. Islam calls a martyr someone that's out waging war for the sake of Allah, and they die in that war. So they totally redefine the concept of martyrdom.